great pleasure to be part of the SETPLAN conference, and we'll continue having very interesting discussions. So good afternoon to everyone in Bled and to those of you who join us online. I'm dialing in from North Holland, and I'm very sorry that I could not come to Bled to be with you and to enjoy Bled's beauty and impressively green credentials. Please have a slice of that delicious looking Bled cream cake on my behalf. The title of our session is Energy for a Sustainable and Inclusive Society. To address this important topic, which is a cornerstone of a European Green Deal, we need to cover a lot of ground, including renewable energy integration, batteries, the built environment, mobility systems, new materials, cross-cutting technologies, and last but not least, societal acceptance. This is a lot to get through in 1 hour. All of these topics we address in the Directorate of Energy, Transport and Climate of the Joint Research Centre, the Knowledge and Science Service of the European Commission. I'm confident that with the help of our 5 distinguished guests, who I will introduce you in a moment, we'll advance our understanding both on the fine detail and of a bigger picture of a fair and inclusive clean energy transition, particularly in the urban environment. We will also have a task for you, our dear viewers and listeners. So please make sure that you've got mobiles handy for the Slido questions that we'll be posing shortly. Just a few words to introduce the topic. The European Green Deal is an opportunity to improve the well-being of our people by making our economy modern, resource efficient and competitive. For this, we need a strong foundation in education, research and innovation. We don't just need to innovate, but also to integrate across sectors such as energy, industry, buildings, transport to improve the places where we live, work, and move around. Cross-sectoral collaboration is a success story of the SETPLAN. As you can see in our latest SETPLAN progress report, which has been just published, the cross-sectoral synergies are multiplying, with many collaborations happening between our working groups on renewables, industry, energy systems, buildings, and positive energy districts. To be able to tackle climate change and sustainability, we need to rethink the way we design, manufacture, build, and maintain our built environment. This is a hugely collaborative task, and its center there are people who actually use these buildings. Renovating our buildings will not just save energy, but also provide a better quality of life and help to tackle energy poverty. We have to support Europeans to renovate and insulate their homes and help local communities to make their schools and public buildings more energy efficient. We need to provide Europeans with affordable, clean solutions, for instance, by lowering the costs of renewable energy technologies and introducing more low-cost electric vehicles to the market. The transition to greener mobility will always offer clean, accessible, and affordable transport for the cities of the future. Most importantly, we need to ensure that climate-friendly technologies are accepted and adopted by consumers. This is a challenge at the heart of Europe's green transition. We cannot move forward without the support of society, engagement and empowerment of local communities. We need to ensure that people feel the benefits of this transition quickly and that they are distributed fairly, both across member states and across social groups, so no one is left behind. For this reason, the European Commission has proposed a solidarity package, which includes a social climate fund. The objective is to fight inequality and energy poverty by directly supporting vulnerable households and helping Europeans to overcome the initial financial hurdle for investments in energy efficiency. We all have an important part to play, and we need to make sure that every person, industry, city, and country will be part of this transformation and can benefit from it. The work of the SETPLAN is crucial in bringing together SETPLAN countries, industries, and researchers to define the energy R&I priorities and to make sure that we have the necessary conditions to reach our energy and climate goals. So before I introduce the panel, let's start with Slido. Grab your gadget and go into Slido.com. You've seen the parameters. You just put set plan lowercase, hash is already there on the screen, on the window. And then please go to the polls section first. So you will be answering certain polling questions. Question and answer section will be a bit later. So thanks very much for putting the question on screen. And let me read it to you. Which three of these factors are the most important to ensure the energy transition has a positive impact on society? Public acceptance, technological innovation, governance, social inclusion, education, and skills. We will leave this poll running for a few minutes and come back to it once I've introduced our 5 speakers in this session. In non-particular order, we've got Dr. Susanna Battel, who is an integrated researcher at the Center for Psychological Research and Social Intervention of the University Institute of Lisbon. Her research focuses on how to promote socio-environmental justice and participation in renewable energy transitions. Welcome, Susanna. Paul Kartavets is Executive Director of Bouygues Europe. Bouygues is a French company active in the construction sector in over 90 countries and in telecoms and television in France. He's also president of the European Construction Technology Platform, which, along with the World Green Building Council, co-chairs the Build for People partnership with the Commission under the Horizon Europe. He is also leader of the Action Cluster on Sustainable Built Environment in the Commission Smart Cities Marketplace. Paul will give us his view from inside the set plan, as he is a member of the implementation groups on energy efficient buildings and positive energy districts. Good afternoon, Paul. Karen van Clausen is Secretary General of Polis, the leading European network of cities and regions on urban transport innovation. Since 1998, Karen has been involved in urban transport networking and policy activities and EU research and innovation projects covering a wide range of urban mobility topics. She will tell us more about urban mobility from the perspective of cities and the governance of innovation. Welcome, Karen. Then we have Professor Dr. Robert Dominko, who is a research professor at the National Institute of Chemistry in Slovenia, Deputy Director of Alistor Airy Network, and a member of the Executive Board of the Battery 2030 Plus initiative. We will hear from him about the batteries of the future and the skills we'll need to produce them. It's good to have you here, Robert.
Yeah, good afternoon.
And finally, we have with us the European Woman Innovator of the Year, Michaela Magas. Michaela is chair of the Industry Commons Foundation, innovation advisor to the European Commission and the G7 leaders, and a member of the high-level roundtable for the new European Bauhaus. She is also CEO of MTF Labs, a global community platform of 8,000 creative innovators and scientific researchers. We look forward to hearing from Michaela about the new European Bauhaus and innovation in the Internet of Things. Thanks a lot for joining us, Michaela.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Now, before we kick off our discussion, let's have a look at Slido, at the results of the poll. I guess I should see it myself here. No, I can only answer. So, answering. Right. You see it on the stage. Public acceptance, education skills, technological innovation, inclusion, governance. All 5 elements are very pronounced, and I'm confident we'll touch upon all of them during our discussion. Thanks very much for participating in the poll. Right, let's go down to work. Robert, if I may start with you. Batteries will be key for integrating renewables into our buildings. Could you tell us a bit about the priorities for battery research in Europe, both short and medium term, and how to strengthen the position of the EU on the global market? Over to you, Robert.
Thank you for the question. Really, batteries are one of the key technologies that will enable this transition to the carbon-free society. And they were actually very well described in the set plan action 7 and with all KPIs that we have. And then at that time, there was a slight mess in the area of European Commission because there were many different organizations, initiatives starting to pop out and taking care about the set plan KPIs promotion or to bring these KPIs to the realization. But nowadays we have this battery association partnership, which somehow established the field. And within that field, we have a Batteries Europe, which is taking care about we have Batteries Europe, which is taking care about the mid-tier levels. We have ICP-IE, which is actually taking over industrialization, and we have also batteries, Battery 2030 Plus initiative, so-called flagship initiative, former flagship initiative, which is taking care about the basic research and development, and also that we will differentiate between all other markets worldwide. So if I just say a few words about Batteries Europe, this is here we are actually following set plan action, and we are opening new calls right now for so-called Generation 3A, Generation 3B, Generation 4A, 4B, whatever generations. So those generations are actually those generations that are required for automotive sector and also partially for storage of renewable sources. On behind of this Batteries Europe platform, then we have initiative Batteries 2030 Plus, where our aim is to re-innovate the batteries, how they are innovated. So that means that we are establishing platform which will enable or which will accelerate battery innovation, which will enable stabilization of batteries, which actually will have a huge impact on sustainability and accessibility of batteries in the future. Of course, with one goal also to bring this price and safety issue on the level that is acceptable by society. That will be also achieved by introducing smart functionalities into the batteries. So if we just look at what medicine did with human lifetime in last 30, 40 years, which was prolonged for 20, 30 years in this period, that's what we can do also with battery cells. By introducing smart functionality, smart sensing, and also self-healing functionalities, so curing of cells, we can prolong their safety, quality, lifetime, and reliability. And at the same time, we are not forgetting about manufacturing and also final recyclability. And what I need to say that this is a chemistry-free initiative, so we are not focusing only on lithium and beyond lithium, but we are focusing also on other elements which are key for this transition, because if we rely on some reports, lithium there is enough lithium, but might be not really accessible to everyone. So,
thanks very much, Robert. Thanks a lot. Karen, batteries are also a key component of electromobility, and from the governance perspective, can you tell us how we can integrate electromobility into urban space? Who should take lead on that? Over to you.
Thank you for the question, Piotr. Well, first of all, I should put out there that electromobility is just one of many solutions that cities are introducing to address the adverse impacts of transport and to make urban mobility more sustainable. At the heart of a sustainable urban mobility policy today is actually a modal shift away from the private car. So just replacing current cars with electric cars will not suffice to address the other challenges beyond greenhouse gases and other emissions, such as congestion, road safety, a fair allocation of space across different modes, etc. And when it comes to space consumption, in particular, electric cars are just as space polluting, I would say, as non-electric ones. So that's why it's important for cities to take up a leading role in electromobility, just as they should do in other innovation areas, actually, because the governance of innovation and the introduction of regulatory frameworks which maximize opportunities, but also mitigate possible negative externalities, is really instrumental in making sure that innovations are aligned with policy goals and do not undermine those policy goals. Cities and regions really need to set the rules of the game in that respect. Now, clearly, the cars that do remain in our urban cores will have to become clean, meaning will have to be electrified and preferably shared. And we see that cities are really taking up their responsibility in accelerating the rollout of electromobility by introducing public charging infrastructure, incentivizing the electrification of captive fleets, and also cleaning up their own fleets. But when we talk more particularly about the charging infrastructure and its integration in urban space, it's very important to properly think about where we want to locate those charging points. And we see that modeling and forecasting of the recharging demand is a centralized approach where in most cases public authorities base their planning of the infrastructure on models that predict how the future demands will be developing. The second method that we see coming into play with cities is the demand-driven approach, where current or future EV users who have no access to a private charging point can request the implementation of a charging point close to their homes if certain criteria are met. And there we see that one of the most common criteria, obviously, is the distance from your house to a charging point. And this is an approach that is often applied in combination with this modeling approach that I mentioned before. And it is a strategy that has proven to be effective in convincing consumers to switch to electric vehicles. Now, there is not really one predominant model. Each city is different. And sometimes we see also that different approaches are being combined. For example, the data-driven approach is also gaining ground, where we are forecasting on the basis of actual usage data at the moment. And this is a more dynamic approach than just the traditional modeling or forecasting. So it also gives us an even better picture of where we stand. So as you can see, cities are taking their responsibility, but it will also be essential in going forward that we join forces across the different levels of government so that they're also being empowered both by the national and the European level in that respect. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Karen. Let's move now to buildings in our urban spaces. So, Susanna, what challenges do we face in terms of integrating renewables into the built environment? Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. So from my perspective, what I would like to highlight is precisely this issue of the socio-environmental injustices that integrating renewables and other smart cities initiatives, so to say, might create in cities and in buildings specifically as well. So also going back to your words in the beginning of this session, I think it is really important that we acknowledge that acceptance is a key factor for integrating renewables in buildings and for fostering smarter, more renewable focused cities. And also that acceptance is engagement and is empowerment. And so I think that is the key message that I would like to leave. And for that, obviously, one of the key challenges is precisely how to promote renewables in buildings and people's acceptance also of more energy efficient technologies, for instance, such as smart meters and others, without creating what we call green gentrification, which basically would imply the often further exclusion and marginalization through these green initiatives of often already economically or otherwise excluded and marginalized groups and citizens. So I think that what is really important is when trying to promote this renovation wave while creating also the conditions for better buildings and more efficient and greener buildings is to focus on these three key tenets of energy justice. So it is really important that we recognize, on one hand, all the groups and citizens that have to be involved while promoting this renovation of buildings and integrating renewables in buildings, so that everyone can integrate this process. The other aspect is obviously as well distributive justice, so precisely related with the first one, to make sure that the costs and benefits of integrating renewables are accounted for, and that people, for instance, the energy poor, actually are not even more, the responsibility is not even put more on them for that. And the third aspect is procedural justice, so making sure that everyone is engaged and can have a say in the decision-making process of trying to integrate renewables in buildings. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Susanna. Now, Paul, can you tell us what exactly is meant by the people-centric built environment? We heard that it's very important for good mobility, to have nobody left behind and address all the societal issues, but is something like a people-centric built environment, is it sustainable by default? Over to you.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to be a bit more provocative about everything that has been said so far, which is quite true and positive, by reminding a few points that we heard this morning also. First of all is the speed at which we have to act. And when Minister Vertovec said 2030 is today, it shows you, I think it's a good expression to show how fast we have to go. Also, Maria de Graça Carvalho, if you remember, mentioned that we should not reduce mobility, we should just make it more sustainable. She was talking about planes at that time, but that was also quite provocative to say, okay, the quality of the service, the quantity of the service must be the same, just it has to be more sustainable. And again, very important also, Darko Kramar said, how can we motivate the people more? That's really one of the important questions. Involving the people is not easy. What I heard so far is people are saying we must engage all into the system. I think that's very nice to say, but I'm in the private sector, but I'm also, I've been locally elected for some time. I'm still active in my local community. This is where we are in contact with the people. We are the people also, of course. And motivation of people is not easy. If we want to wait to have everybody engaged, I think it's gonna take a long time. So I'm just trying to be a bit more, critical on this. What we need to also do is to make things more sustainable, even if the people did not think about it somehow. I think that's also important. And to give the example of what Maria said on the plane, you are taking the plane the same way, but maybe the plane has another type of fuel. The cars that are sold are being more and more electric. Electricity is more sustainable. Right now, when you want to have an electricity bill, if you ask or pay a supplement, you can have green electricity. If someday the electricity from the grid is green, no matter whether you thought about it or not, it's going to be sustainable. So I think we have to be realistic. We have to push as much as possible solutions that people will adopt even without having to think about them. That is more realistic. Also, I wanted to use a comparison with the smartphones. Smartphones change our lives. People adopted them so quickly, they're even ready to pay a lot of money for a smartphone. Can we find a way to pack energy solutions, smart energy solutions, in a way that is so attractive for the people as the smartphones? If we have that kind of state of mind, maybe we can figure out something. Before we talk about how the people can adopt things, we have to go also a bit upstream. And upstream, before lunch, we had a panel on regulation. And I think we still have work to do on regulation, actually. There are two things. with the Commission now, you have the Fit for 55 package. You have many texts on the table for the moment. There are other texts that we did not speak about today. This regulatory environment is extremely important to push technologies, but it is also very complex. So I know there are member states representatives here also. We must realize that public authorities, private companies, everybody who has to apply their legislation is receiving a lot of messages at the same time for the climate and environmental challenges. So let us make sure that we can manage this extreme regulatory pressure of the moment to make the better use of it. I'll give you one example that was not mentioned so far, is that if we only talk about CO2 reduction, if we only talk about, which is climate change mitigation, well, financing will slowly not be there anymore, because the sustainable financing framework that is coming out of Europe now asks us to also go for climate change adaptation and also environmental profiles, water management, circularity, that was mentioned once this morning, circular economy, pollution control, and biodiversity management. So you have to realize that maybe that's one of the evolutions of the set plan. Energy is the fil rouge, is the heart of it, but we need to go for all climate objectives and all environmental objectives. That's quite a pressure, but it is important to know a project that is only on CO2 will not have preferential financing in the future. It was also mentioned a few times, and it's really important for us, is education and skills. Education of the people was mentioned this morning. I wanted to tell you that in the construction sector, we insist on skills for the workers, skills also for the engineers. At engineering level, we have what we call l'alternance. I think the word also exists in English, alternance, which means people are studying engineering, spend part of their time in the company already. So they alternate work and studies, which is also something quite interesting. For the skills of the workers, we use digital capacity to exchange. When one worker does something complex, he can film himself so that all the workers of the company around the world can take advantage of that experienced worker. That's also really important. The people are not only European. You know that Europe has a role to play at international level. So it is also important that what we do in Europe can be communicated, can be shared, can be repeated all over the world in emerging economies, for instance. So this is really important. Remember that CO2 production from Europe is less than 10% of the CO2 emissions on Earth. So alone, we will not make it. We really need to be all together. One point mentioned also quite a few times is the cost of energy, cost of electricity in particular, because we're turning to electrification. In Belgium, in my country, in your bill, electricity itself is only 40% of the bill. Okay, so you understand that the electricity bill is something that has to be managed to make sure that we can maybe include more innovation without having the bill of the individuals to raise. Finally, to say something a bit different also, we talk about technologies. I like to think of the blackout test. I think we should have the possibility to imagine what happens if there is a blackout, what is still working, how much energy is locally produced and not necessarily connected, because you heard a few years ago that when something happened in Germany, there was a problem in Spain, so connections are also sometimes complicated. What we saw this morning was really super with the many countries acting together. But let's make sure that even in difficult times, we have solutions to make sure life goes on. So thank you very much. I will not say more than this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Paul. You touched a lot of grounds. One conclusion for my work with the directorate is we are quite well aligned with the needs for research, because of some things what you've said almost felt like reading some of our reports. And of course, as Joint Research Center, we cannot do it ourselves. We do it together with a whole research community, both European and worldwide. Now let's turn to Michaela, and let's talk about the new European Bauhaus. How one can design things which are beautiful, sustainable, and also inclusive, that they are not just for elites or for the richest. Over to you, Michaela.
Thank you. I think I can build really well on what's just been said, actually, with everything that we are doing, except that I have to emphasize one thing, that everything that we are doing is based on real experience of engaging people on the ground, of actually successfully engaging people on the ground. So perhaps we can exchange some more ideas afterwards about that side of things. But the new European Bauhaus uniquely places culture and creativity at the forefront of solutions for the Green Deal. And if I may quote from the concept paper, which was generated by the high-level roundtable, which I'm privileged to be part of, a culture and design-led approach is an important strategy for the transition to a low-carbon, regenerative and just society. So for the first time, that means ideas and innovations on how to improve our living environment are being fed to the policy directly from the grassroots, creative innovation. And the results from this co-creation on the ground are set to inspire policy missions, which can then further support solutions on the ground. And within the high-level roundtable, we see that as a virtuous cycle of bottom-up, top-down approach. And this has already brought several emerging paradigms to the forefront. So if I can quote another sentence from the high-level roundtable concept paper, cross-domain and multi-perspective transgenerational knowledge exchange is necessary to build a deep respect for the environment and for each other. So that means cooperation across generations, across sectors, cross-domain, across science, innovation, technology, and the arts. All of that is vital for stimulating knowledge exchange and upskilling of communities. So education was just mentioned, for instance. And translating ideas into practice in experimental labs. You may have heard President von der Leyen mention this term before. And this happens through grassroots collaborative prototyping, so hands-on engagement. This allows for testing of sustainable solutions and novel technological affordances directly on human experience and on our environment. And so personal development through this rapid knowledge exchange and hands-on prototyping then stimulates behavioral change and innovation breakthroughs as well. And within this context, radical inclusion is an approach that we advocate for. And this refrains from dividing people into categories, but instead it achieves cohesion by focusing on convergence and a bias for action. And with this kind of strategy in place, it's possible to envisage a behavioral shift where the future of work is driven by missions. And so this is a grand ambition, of course, but this enables us to then aim for moonshots and to adopt a perspective that goes beyond Europe, this has also been mentioned, and beyond human. And so this means not only human-centric, for instance, Industry 5.0, as we currently have within the European program, but an ecosystemic approach that accounts for all species and all ecosystems as part of our living environment. And as I always say within the European Bauhaus, if each participant on the ground, regardless of their starting point or their level of knowledge, takes one step forward in their personal development as a result of this engagement towards sustainable ecosystemic solutions, the result will be a large-scale societal transformation.
Thanks very much, Michaela. Now, let's come back to Slido. Before we come to the second round of questions to our panelists, now if you go to the Q&A session, just say Q&A, you can type your question. So please think about questions, type them in. If we've got some time at the end, we'll pick up and ask the panelists. Now let's start the second round of questions to our distinguished panelists. I'll go back to Robert. Do we have the skills we need for the battery industry of the future? You mentioned new chemistries, you mentioned new technologies, new materials. And if we don't, what should we do to have them? And what do we need? Over to you.
I couldn't catch this question, but...
Okay, so let me say then, it's about the skills for battery industry. And I guess somebody will tell me if my audio is going down. So do we have the skills we need for the battery industry of the future? And if not, what do we need to do? Over.
Oh, yes, thank you. So the question is right on place. Sorry. Yeah, the question is right on place. So we just had this discussion this morning in Brussels during Battery Innovation Days, which is going on sporadically to this set plan conference. And also we saw the awareness from the previous slide that skills are needed. So I will give you just an example. We are expecting 1,000 gigawatt hour production in Europe by 2030. And each gigawatt hour production will require approximately 300 employees directly employed in the company, and approximately 3 to 5 times more indirectly employed to the company. So that's a huge number. So that's a few million of people who will be really engaged to the production of batteries. And that's the whole value chain is covered with that. But what do we have? Almost zero. So we don't have skills because with the mobile phones and computers, we left them to the Far East, and with that, they developed also battery industry. So right now, for example, a company like Northvolt in Sweden, they are employing Japanese engineers to teach them, and those they will start to teach another engineers and another engineers, but we don't have time to do that. So we need to increase this speed of teaching, and not only on academic level, more even on professional level. And then, of course, on vocational level and also on public level. So there are 4 different levels of education. And right now we are making plans. Academic education is almost established. So it is ongoing very well. There are, for example, also in Erasmus Mundus Plus course, which is University of Ljubljana is involved on batteries, and that attracts young people from all over the world. More problematic is professional education, because we don't have a lot of experience how to produce batteries, how to produce qualitative batteries with the same quality or even higher quality that they are produced in the Far East. And for that, we will struggle. We need to actually establish the centers. We need to reskill or upskill people that are currently mainly involved in automotive industry, since we know that moving in automotive industry from combustion engine to the battery-powered engine or the battery-powered vehicle, we need less spare parts, we need less expertise, and we need different expertise. So this is huge investment now in Europe. Many companies are doing that to reskill and upskill their workers. And if I mentioned a few million of people, most of those few million people will be blue-coat workers. So that means directly involved into the production. So like a technical expert, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, managers as well, and businessmen, if I'm calling them also as a blue-coat, but they are not really blue-coat. But then when it comes to the vocational education, this is also necessary to bring awareness of the batteries. What batteries are, how to use batteries, how to dispose them, how to actually maintain them, and so on. And this comes also then with the public education. So this is, as I said, it's a really necessary step. And now on the European level, including this battery academy, there was established, including battery partnership, there was established battery academy, where different initiatives are getting together, and they are actually we are joining our forces or our knowledge, expertise on different levels of the battery value chain to enhance or to make faster these education activities. And one almost necessary point is also that some national governments are aware of it, some not yet. They will need also transfer centers at government level or at national levels, regional levels, where knowledge will be transferred and new workers or new young people will be trained to be really properly educated and well prepared for this new era of technology. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So it's a huge challenge, but hope we'll overcome like we've done it in the past. Let me turn to Karen. We talk about people's involvement now. When it comes to introduction of new low-carbon technologies, how do we address the issue of public acceptance? What are the obstacles we need to overcome to get people to accept the offer which we've got for them in the view of sustainability and decarbonization and fighting for the climate and the planet over?
Well, also for the transformation to zero-emission transport in cities, it will be instrumental, like was mentioned by others and including yourself, to leave no one behind. And in order to be able to do that, we will have to find a way to reconcile the greater good with individual needs. And that's the permanent challenge, actually, that our decision makers are facing. What people want, what the city as a whole needs, those two are not necessarily aligned, or not always. But for citizens to choose and to adapt to and accept low carbon mobility solutions, they will have to become the obvious choice, those solutions. And for that purpose, a fairer allocation of space in favor of sustainable modes will be instrumental, but also the physical and digital integration of those modes, because that will facilitate seamless multimodal lifestyles. So offering a range of alternatives to that private polluting car. Physical integration means hubs and interchanges in the city where different low carbon modes can come together and can be easily combined, but also digital integration through mobility as a service, for example, where you can book different options through an integrated digital ecosystem. In fact, an important role in that respect is allocated to shared mobility services, and we see that they're also really gaining ground. And they can be an important factor also for accelerating electrification, because they represent captive fleets and they also represent newer fleets, so that can really accelerate that market as well. But we shouldn't forget also that when we are talking about electromobility, we're not just talking about the private car. We should also look at electrifying captive fleets such as public transport and urban freight, city logistics vehicles. And there really a substantial change can be brought about as well, because we're talking about big numbers. And what I also believe in is a tremendous potential in terms of further boosting the increasing success of the e-bike. It's taking cycling beyond its typical 5-kilometer range, and it's really offering a valuable alternative also for more sustainable commuting into city centers, which is often a burden on cities. And even more so if we accompany those e-bikes by dedicated long-distance cycling infrastructure. And in addition, of course, we also have the new kid on the block, the e-scooters, which can also play a positive role as a complement to public transport for the first and the last mile in the urban environment. However, I also need to stress that incentives alone will not just get us there and will not lead to that massive adoption of the alternatives. What we really also need to do is internalize the external costs brought to society by unsustainable modes. This will really be essential in moving forward and also in growing that acceptance and adoption of low carbon technologies and low carbon modes. And we see that an increasing number of cities is introducing measures such as low, ultra low, and in the future, even zero emission zones. They're also introducing congestion and smart kilometer charging, as well as other types of access regulation to really address the whole range of negative impacts of transport on health, the environment, space use, quality of life, and safety. Those measures are definitely politically sensitive, but they're also very powerful and really indispensable in moving forward, because introducing the polluter pays principle is long overdue as well. We also need to move away from the false narrative which says that such measures mostly harm the groups in society which are already the most vulnerable, because this is not the case, as those people tend to live in areas which are exposed the most to noise and air pollution and very often don't even own a car themselves. Now, finally, when it comes to electrification and related charging infrastructure, it's also important to mention that all stakeholders have the responsibility to guarantee a just and fair transition and rollout of measures, whether it's incentives to buying clean vehicles or carefully positioning the infrastructure, because very often we see that the financially most viable locations for infrastructure tend to be selected by the private sector in particular, because they generate the most revenue. But that could be leading to a situation where the most rich areas get plenty of charging points and the less affluent neighborhoods get none. So that would be problematic, of course, if we want to have that massive shift and that we need to make. And the modeling and forecasting tools I mentioned before can really also help to have a more correct geographical spread of the charging infrastructure and prevent a concentration of charging points in the most profitable locations. So also reaching out and branching out to the more socioeconomically challenged parts of the neighborhood, and also low density areas which are more car dependent than the urban core. So this will be really instrumental also in moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Regarding e-bikes, I may share my own experience from the Netherlands. First, I was surprised to see people at the age of my parents who've been much faster on the bike than I was. And then also there are drawbacks, because neighbors told me that they learned cycling on a normal bicycle, they got electrical one, and all the reflexes, the speed is different. So this adds up to the complexity of mixing the technology, acceptance by Europeans, safety issues which require some regulations. Probably the safety helmets will have to be more and more distributed sooner or later. And this is just a little element of all this complex ecosystem which Karen just described to us, and we heard from other panelists. So more and more we've got holistic approach to issues, and that's also a big challenge for science services like ours, to overcome silos and make sure that we cover all aspects for the benefit of the citizens. Thanks again, Karen. Now, Susanna, how can we use the low carbon technologies to alleviate the problems of energy poverty and social justice? Because we hear all the time today that any progress may lead to increasing the differences, to increasing the social problems, to address the needs of the rich at the expense of the poor. Over.
Thank you. So exactly. So I would like to take this question in a broader way, if possible, and to go back to what I said before, and also what was mentioned by Michaela and others already here today. I think one key issue is precisely that, is to acknowledge that just changing the technologies will not allow us to be just and inclusive for all. So we really need to change the technologies for sure, and to have more research and better batteries and renewable energy technologies and so on and so forth. But for sure, that's not enough. So we really need to, again, adopt an holistic approach that allows us to also develop those technologies and deploy them in a just and fair way for all. And for instance, for tackling also, and specifically energy poverty, I think coupling these new technologies and energy efficiency practices and technologies with renewable energy communities, for instance, is for sure a way forward to try and tackle energy poverty, while also pushing for decentralization and more community and hopefully participatory modes of doing renewability and of tackling energy poverty at the same time. So that's a first key point that I wanted to highlight. And the other one is precisely to also highlight here that the importance of making sure that we do co-create this SAT plan with people is also because if we keep excluding them and if we keep reproducing existent inequalities, we will alienate people, and that might actually create a backlash against any type of sustainable or renewable energy transition that we might hope for. So if we really want people to move on, everyone, with a renewable energy transition, we really need to guarantee that we engage everyone, because otherwise, and some studies, some research is already showing that, we might even go back to an increase in, for instance, climate change skepticism. So I think that's the second point I wanted to highlight, is that we can even go back and get worse than we are at now. And finally, the third one, which I think is also really important and was also highlighted here today, is this going beyond Europe focus and adopting a whole life cycle approach for renewable energy technologies. Because I think that unless we actually recognize that the technologies we are researching and developing and deploying do not only affect us here in Europe, but actually often affect other communities, other places, also non-human, as Michaela highlighted, other ecosystems in other places around the globe. So for instance, batteries were talked about here and lithium specifically. And we know that all the supply chains of these technologies, they do affect a lot of different communities somewhere. So I think a really important point to move forward with a truly sustainable energy transition, and that is able to tackle energy poverty and inclusion and justice all together in an holistic way, is one that also promotes this whole life cycle transparency, let's say, of renewable energy technologies and practices and policies. So I'll leave it there, but these are the key three issues that I think are really needed to promote renewable energy transition while tackling energy poverty everywhere, so to say.
Thanks a lot, Susanna. Let's now turn to Paul. Well, how do you see the set plan and cooperation between various groups, various sectors to contribute to decarbonization, to climate mitigation, climate adaptation, in improving the air quality in our cities? How the set plan can help cities? Paul, over to you.
Is it working? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think there's something really important about the set plan with its 10 action groups, is that we are really looking at almost all possibilities for technology on energy production. So it's very important to look at all of them. I strongly believe that the energy demand is bound to continue raising, and so optimizing all the energy sources is definitely important, while greening as much as possible the electricity. So the wide range of working groups of the set plan is really important for that. And I would insist on what was just said on the life cycle analysis. It is important that each energy source is really analyzed in terms of pros and cons, qualities and complications that we could meet, and life cycle analysis for each one of them. It's really important. The other very good point of the set plan, it is that we have all the actors. Set plan meetings are with member states representatives, people from the Commission, people from the cities, and the private sector. So these are the two strengths, I think, of the set plan, is the wide range of situations analyzed and the diversity of the actors. So I really think we have a great work to do to find solutions together.
Thanks very much, Paul. Now, that's the last question. How we talked about how we make our transport better, our buildings smarter, more efficient. Now, Michaela, how the Internet of Things, and more specifically the IoT innovation, can support the energy transition? Over.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to, again, build on what has been said, and especially what Susanna was saying and what Paul was just saying. So basically, if we want to ensure sustainability, of course, it's just been reiterated twice, across industrial production and in distribution, the top priority is to take the Internet of Things to the service of the management of the complete life cycle of products and materials. So typically materials will be sourced out in one domain, they will be produced into products in another domain, they will be distributed by yet another domain, and then they will be recycled in another. So that means that we really need to be able to bridge domains if we want to track and trace the data about products and materials and manage them properly. And this means that our data-driven IoT systems must operate in what we might call a common railway tracks. Now, currently in Europe, we're building all these wonderful data spaces in different domains and marketplaces. And each one is building their own system. And this reminds me of the old problem we had with the railways, which is that each railway was built on a different gauge standard. And then there was a real barrier towards the establishment of an international railway network. So solving interoperability across domains is therefore one of our biggest challenges and our biggest goals. And as part of DGRTD, we've got the Industry Commons initiative, where we are creating a legacy for cross-domain interoperability. So this is our main focus. And we've started with something called Ontocommons, which is an ontology ecosystem. We're actually looking at a system of bridging semantic technologies across domains. And solving this challenge is absolutely key if you want to achieve not just lifecycle management, but what we call closed loop lifecycle management. Because you actually want to follow the beginning of life of a product, which, for instance, it means, for example, reducing impacts of extractive practices. For instance, it would be the goal there. Or middle of life, where you want to do performance optimization, so conserving energy. Or end of life, where, of course, you do either decommissioning or recycling or reuse. So, and in the batteries case, for instance, that's a really great example. And this, of course, then, again, in the batteries case, particularly relates to the recovery of critical raw materials, but as well as preservation of natural ecosystems. And therefore, it allows us to monitor some of the most essential and most critical aspects of digitalization. Basically, it requires, as it has been reiterated, holistic ecosystemic approach. There's a science that's been established of enterprise integration, which integrates in an enterprise all of the different elements of business, of sustainability, of the ambitions of the engineering of the systems. But I would say that maybe we need to consider ecosystem integration. Building on what has just been said. And interoperability then must be supported by also layers of horizontal enablers. And this would include various systems. So systems of agreements from the point of view of international regulation or peer-to-peer contracts, systems of resilience, so very relevant to what has been discussed, so environmental sustainability, but also things like resilience to black swan events. Then systems of responsibility, so corporate social responsibility, responsible AI, ethics, and then systems of beliefs. That means societal values. We need to build these systems on top of societal values. And once all of those systems are in place and we can standardize them across domains, then interoperability actually allows for breakthrough innovation to build on top of responsibly managed cross-domain capabilities. And in a way that is fully trackable and traceable within the value network, which is unprecedented. And this allows us to join all areas of knowledge which are necessary to achieve the Green Deal, because we know we need to join all areas of knowledge. And we can then start to create a vision of what we might refer to as a European common data market.
Thanks very much, Michaela. I don't want to abuse my moderator's position. I'll just only mention the interoperability laboratory we've got connected, one in Petten with the one in Ispra in Italy. Let's move on. Now, before we look into Slido question, I would like to give our speakers the opportunity to sum up their thoughts. Now we are a bit behind time. We started late, but we should not take time from the next panel. May I ask you to think about the message we would like to convey to the audience to carry out from that panel, or maybe some reflections of what you have heard from other panelists, and inject another element, which is a question, the most popular on my screen. It's considering the absolute emergency and daunting challenge of decreasing emissions. Can we seriously keep current services level, or should we rather think about redefining the services completely? It comes from Elga Mal from EE-Array. So let's start with Robert.
My final message would be Europe has capability to have a sustainable battery production and can take like 1/3 of worldwide market. Those batteries will be like predicted in set plan or even better, with low CO2 free footprint, price even lower that is right now written in the set plan. But we should not forget about skills and education. So without that, we will not have a workforce. We will not have further technological development, which is needed, which is happening actually in industry, not on the research universities. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robert. Karen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would just like to pick up on a number of key points or action points we need to put at the center of our activities. That's public-private sector cooperation and aligning and joining interests and forces. Getting out of our silos, so the different sectors to talk to each other. Don't be afraid to not just introduce carrots, but also sticks. We will need them if we want people to change their behavior. We need at the same time a just and a fair transition to zero emission. And for that, we all need political leadership and the different levels of government to empower each other, not to go against each other. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Karen. Now it's Susanna's turn. Over to you.
Thank you. So I would just like to reiterate this idea that for low carbon technologies to be really sustainable and have a role in alleviating energy poverty everywhere, they really must be socially and environmentally just, inclusive, and promote well-being throughout their whole life cycle, as we've been saying. And that means not to perpetuate this extractivist approach that Mikhail also referred to, that has characterized our fossil societies. And so we really should use the sustainable energy transition that we want to promote to also change that type of approach and be more just overall. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Susanna. Paul, what about you?
Allow me a very special conclusion, just 1 second. I'm going to be very, very short, but I say we have been talking about a lot of things, and I thought of a slogan that concentrates all the things we have to do. And I take advantage of the fact that I'm on the stage. So what are we trying to do all together? Is to give the highest quality of life to the largest number of people with the lowest environmental impact. So I show you the sign language of the digital age. The highest quality of life for the largest number of people with the lowest environmental impact. So you can... It's a slogan with gestures. With all the meetings that we will have today, at least I hope you will remember the YMCA of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. I hope next conference, all of us will be able to be on stage together. Last but not least, Michaela.
Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. So, yeah, if we want to be truly informed about which services to keep and which to cut down, we will get the right set of perspectives and multiple perspectives if we adopt a cross-domain ecosystemic approach and if we include all ecosystems and all species beyond just human-centric, because that will give us the right answers to our, or rather it will come closer to giving us the right answers to our question. And this means going beyond Industry 5.0 to an ecosystem integration approach for industry that includes societal environmental values and also crucially enables this idea of closed-loop lifecycle management in the IoT. And to achieve this, we need to operate on the same railway tracks as it has been reiterated, I think. So solving cross-domain interoperability is something that can take us closer to this idea of this European common data market that will help us solve these issues.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot to all panelists.